As Megan said, I'm Kyle McDuffie, and the topic of our webinar today is the Paperless Lab, a practical approach. So just a bit about myself before we get started. So I am the president of the company. So I've been the president since 2001. My original background is as a chemist. I have my degree in chemistry. Before I worked as consulting, I spent a lot of time in an actual analytical laboratory, a series of them, both in quality assurance and quality control, R&D, and also spent a bit of time in doing web-based clinical trials related software. So I've been in consulting off and on the last 16 years, a variety of industries, everything from biopharmaceuticals, food and beverage, chemical, mining, etc. So I've got a lot of experience, and I remember the day when LIMS and lab automation was new. So it's a long time ago, back in the 80s. So I've been doing this for a while, had a couple of years in between where I did some other things. So I've seen a lot of things over the years and hopefully be able to impart some of that knowledge to you as part of the topic we're going to discuss today. So the agenda of our talk is the following, as you see on the screen. So this is obviously a complex topic, lots of things that we could talk about, and we only have 45 to 50 minutes in order to talk about it. So I'm going to try and hit the highlights of what I feel are the most important, and hopefully from that you'll hear enough that you'll want to hear more, or maybe that answered your key questions. So reverse the order a little bit from the published remarks, and I'd like to start out with a definition of what is the paperless lab, and is the paperless lab a myth? Start there, then talk about benefits, challenges, how to go about doing it with a risk-based approach based on our knowledge as a company, my personal experience as well, and lastly, open the floor to questions. So that's what we're going to be doing today, and hopefully you will find it entertaining and useful. All right, so I'd like to start out with talking about how it is today for a typical lab analyst working in a variety of, really independent of any particular industry. And what you typically see is that there's a lot of different sophisticated instrumentation depending on what type of science you're doing that has different degrees of automation involved with it, very high reliance on software and software tools, of course. And depending on what you're attempting to do, these can be very expensive, complicated pieces of equipment or simplistic pieces of equipment. In addition to that, we've got SOPs and test methods, which we want the analyst to basically follow. Most every laboratory today has a LIMS or something they call the LIMS that does sample management, that tracks the results, that prepares reports to send to the customer, whether that's a commercial system or something that's in-house designed, most commonly commercially deployed solutions. We also have work instructions, which is, the only difference between that and the SOPs and the test method is work instructions are typically not mandatory, so they're the best practices of that particular type of test maybe, or type of experiment if it's an R&D environment, or, if it's a synthesis, then perhaps the best practice on how to go about doing that. In addition to that, we have labeling software. So most labs have some type of labeling software. They have either notebooks, either electronic lab notebooks or paper ones. They may, if they're not using the notebooks, they might be using forms. Pretty much there's still spreadsheets around for various calculations, which might be complicated. They might be simple, depending on what's required. And the bottom line of it is the analyst in the center sort of collates all this information on how to do their job and all these different systems that they need to interact with. And that's something that in the CSols language, we call that tribal knowledge. So when you get a new analyst, they need to basically get to the point as part of their training of where they have this tribal knowledge on how to perform the various tests in that particular lab. And that can be a relatively straightforward process, or it can be a complex process. But as you can see, we have electronic systems, we have paper systems today, we have all different kinds of tools from different vendors. So the analyst is probably familiar with working in a heterogeneous environment.